65,000 years ago, someone stepped into a boat, terrified. Behind them was everything they knew, every fire, every familiar face. Ahead was open water, endless, dark, with no visible shore anywhere. They had no compass, no map, no idea what waited beyond. And yet they pushed off anyway, paddled forward, disappeared into the unknown. That single decision helped populate an entire continent we now call Australia. Think about that terror for a moment. Truly imagine it yourself. No rescue boat waited nearby. No radio call could summon help. If the current shifted wrong, there was no second chance available. This is the story of how humans conquered nearly the whole planet. Not with engines, not with satellites, not with anything we'd call technology today. Just legs, lungs, memory, courage, and an unstoppable hunger for survival. Let's start with something almost embarrassingly simple, the thing that started everything: food. Ancient peoples weren't wandering for adventure or curiosity about distant horizons. They were chasing herds, following rivers, tracking the rhythm of seasons. When the animals moved, hungry stomachs forced entire families to follow. When berries vanished from one hillside, someone's children needed the next one. A group might shift only a few miles across an entire lifetime, but multiply that by hundreds of generations and distances become staggering. No single person walked from Africa to Australia in one journey. Instead, it was a slow ripple, spreading outward, generation after generation. Grandparents pushed the edge slightly further than their own grandparents once had. Their grandchildren pushed it further still, chasing better hunting, cleaner water. Imagine growing up never once seeing the boundary of your world. Every horizon your parents crossed becomes simply where your own life begins. That is how a species crossed oceans without ever meaning to. No one ever announced, "Today we begin colonizing an entire continent." It happened quietly, invisibly, one restless family at a time, endlessly repeating. Love played its part too, quiet, unspoken, easy to overlook entirely. Parents pushed further not for glory, but for their children's safety. A mother watching her child go hungry will walk anywhere necessary. That desperate love, more than curiosity, likely drove humanity across the earth. Now, here's something that deserves far more credit than it usually gets. The human body itself was quietly built for this kind of journey. Efficient sweat glands, upright walking, lungs built for endurance over sprinting power. Modern hunter-gatherers regularly covered 10 to 20 miles in a day, not as some extraordinary feat, but as an ordinary, expected Tuesday. Children learned to walk long distances the same way they learned language. Their bodies were built, shaped, and hardened by relentless daily movement. But walking alone doesn't explain everything, because you can still get lost, you can still starve, still misjudge weather, still walk toward death. Survival required something far more valuable than strong legs. It required knowledge. Which plants meant water was near, which clouds meant a storm approaching, which animal tracks meant danger, which silence meant something was watching. This knowledge wasn't discovered once by one clever, lucky individual explorer. It was passed down, mouth to mouth, story to story, generation to generation. A single wrong guess about water could kill an entire traveling family. So elders spoke carefully, repeating warnings until children could recite them by heart. Imagine sitting by firelight, memorizing which valley hides a hidden spring. Your life someday might depend entirely on remembering that one detail correctly. Fail to remember, and thirst would punish that failure without mercy. There was no shortcut, no manual, only patient repetition around the fire. Grief, too, was a constant companion on every dangerous, uncertain journey. Some travelers never reached the next valley, never saw the next spring. Their names disappeared, but their warnings likely saved those who followed. Now let's talk about the actual road out of Africa itself.
Genetic evidence points to a narrow crossing called the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. During ice ages, sea levels dropped, and that strait grew narrower. What is ocean today was once a shorter, more crossable stretch of water. Ancient humans didn't need miracles, they needed timing and a little luck. They walked toward a horizon their ancestors could never have reached before. This pattern repeats again and again throughout the story of human migration. Nature occasionally opened a door, and humans, hungry, simply walked through it. Now picture Beringia, a vast frozen land bridge between Siberia and Alaska. During the last ice age, so much water froze into massive glaciers. Sea levels dropped dramatically, exposing dry land where ocean now sits. Families didn't sail to America, they simply walked there, following mammoths. Snow crunched beneath their feet, where today ships cross deep ocean water. They had no idea they were crossing between continents, they were just hunting. Somewhere in that frozen silence, humanity quietly entered an entire new hemisphere. No fanfare, no ceremony, just cold wind and the smell of wood smoke. Children clung to their mothers' backs as breath froze in the air. This is how an entire hemisphere was populated, one cold footstep at a time. Imagine the silence out there, broken only by wind and distant howls. No trees, no shelter, just endless white stretching toward a pale horizon. Every footstep risked frostbite, exhaustion, or a predator hidden in the haze. Yet families kept moving, driven by hunger and the promise of herds ahead. Somewhere behind them, an entire continent quietly waited to be discovered. Now for something genuinely mysterious, something archaeologists still argue about today. Reaching Australia required crossing open water that was never fully exposed land. Even at the lowest sea levels in history, that gap never closed. So around 65,000 years ago, humans built some kind of boat. We still don't know exactly what it looked like or how it worked. We only know it worked well enough to carry people to safety. Somewhere on a beach in Southeast Asia, someone made an impossible choice. They pushed a fragile craft into water with no land in sight. Did they know an island waited beyond, or were they simply desperate? We may never fully know what courage or fear drove that decision, but their footprints, quite literally, are why humans exist in Australia today. Picture the moment land finally appeared after days of endless open water. Relief must have felt overwhelming, mixed with disbelief that they had survived. Someone likely wept, someone likely laughed, someone likely simply collapsed onto sand. That single landing began tens of thousands of years of continuous human presence. Entire cultures, languages, and traditions eventually grew from that one desperate crossing. Archaeologists still debate the exact vessel, but the achievement itself remains undisputed. Now let's jump forward to the Pacific, thousands of years later. Polynesian voyagers didn't drift accidentally onto remote islands scattered across the ocean. They planned deliberate voyages, carrying seeds, animals, and entire founding communities aboard. Double-hulled canoes carried families prepared to build permanent new lives. Their navigation system had no charts, no instruments, no written directions. Instead, they read stars, ocean swells, clouds, and the flight paths of birds. Certain seabirds fly home to land each evening before the sun sets. Watching their direction at dusk could reveal an island still unseen.
Skilled navigators could reportedly feel an island long before spotting it. Ocean swells bend and ripple differently near land, even from miles away. Trained hands resting against a canoe's hull could sense that subtle change. This knowledge took years of apprenticeship, memorization, patience, and repeated failure. Imagine trusting your entire family's survival to a feeling in your palms. Now imagine being wrong, with nothing but empty horizon in every direction. Some voyages succeeded gloriously, founding thriving new island communities for centuries.
Others almost certainly vanished completely, swallowed quietly by an indifferent ocean. We only ever hear the stories of the ones who survived. Every successful island landing hides an unknown number of silent, forgotten failures. Imagine standing on a beach, watching a canoe shrink into the distance. You may never know if your family survived or where they landed. That uncertainty must have haunted those left behind for the rest of their lives. Yet still, canoes kept launching, generation after generation, toward unseen horizons. Hope, it seems, was stronger than fear, even when fear was completely reasonable. Boats themselves varied wildly depending on what each environment could provide. Reed boats appeared where rivers offered soft, bundled plants near shorelines. Dugout canoes were carved from single trees in dense river forests. In colder northern regions, boats were stretched from animal skin over bone. Wood was scarce there, but sealskin and bone were always available. Each solution was invented independently, shaped entirely by local materials available. No single genius spread boats across the globe from one starting point. Humanity kept solving the same problem again and again in isolation. Walking alone couldn't carry everything a growing community eventually needed to move, so humans began domesticating animals strong enough to carry heavier burdens. Horses, donkeys, llamas, each transformed how far, how fast, how much. Camels deserve special mention for conquering some of Earth's harshest deserts. They can survive brutal heat and go remarkably long stretches without water. Without camels, crossing the Sahara would have been nearly impossible for centuries. Someone eventually invented saddles strong enough to balance heavy cargo safely. That simple invention opened entire trade routes across previously impassable desert sand. Imagine a caravan moving slowly across dunes under a punishing desert sun, every traveler silently calculating exactly how many days of water remained. One miscalculation, one dry well, could mean death for the entire group. Imagine the smell of dust, the taste of dry, cracked lips. Children walked in silence, saving breath, saving energy, saving whatever strength remained. Every rise on the horizon brought a flicker of hope, then disappointment. Finally, water, a shimmering pool, and something close to pure joy. That relief, multiplied across thousands of journeys, built the trade routes we study today. Long-distance movement wasn't only about migration, it was also about trade. Communities exchanged goods across distances they themselves never personally traveled at all. A single shell might pass through dozens of hands before reaching its final home. Archaeologists find ancient tools hundreds of miles from where that stone naturally exists. This proves ancient people were far more connected than we often assume. Strangers separated by mountains and deserts still somehow shared goods and ideas. Imagine holding a shell from an ocean you will never personally see. Someone, somewhere, carried it across mountains through hands you will never know. Trust between strangers made this possible, built slowly over countless careful exchanges. That quiet web of trust connected humanity long before anyone called it trade.
None of this travel happened through pure individual heroism or isolated bravery. It required trust, cooperation, and careful planning among entire traveling groups. Someone had to decide how much food each person could safely carry. Someone had to decide when to rest and when danger meant moving faster. Disagreements likely happened, tempers flared, fears spread quickly through tired, hungry groups. Yet somehow, cooperation usually won because survival depended entirely on sticking together. Trust wasn't automatic, it was earned through shared hardship, shared meals, shared fear.
A single selfish decision could doom an entire traveling group overnight. So communities punished betrayal harshly and rewarded loyalty just as strongly. This wasn't sentiment, it was survival math, written into early human culture. We should be honest about something rarely discussed in these stories. Long journeys carried very real risks of starvation, thirst, disease, and violence. Not every migration succeeded. Many attempts almost certainly ended in complete disaster. Entire families likely vanished into deserts, oceans, and unfamiliar hostile territory forever. We don't hear their stories because they left no descendants to remember them. Every successful migration we study today survived a landscape littered with failure. Somewhere, an entire family likely starved just one valley from safety. Somewhere else, disease swept through a group already weakened by hunger. We rarely speak of these losses, yet they shaped every surviving lineage. Fear must have traveled with every group, quiet, constant, never fully silenced. And still, people kept moving, because staying still often meant certain death. Timing mattered enormously too, since seasons could mean life or sudden death. Leave too early, and storms could destroy a voyage before it truly began. Leave too late, and shifting winds might strand travelers far from land. Elders watched the sky for weeks, waiting patiently for exactly the right moment. That patience, quiet and disciplined, saved countless lives across countless generations. Polynesian voyagers waited for specific winds, specific currents, specific favorable months. Departing at the wrong moment could easily doom an entire voyage. Patience itself became a survival skill, passed down like any other knowledge. Rivers offered something different, a natural highway cutting through difficult terrain. The Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates all carried more than water downstream. They carried people, goods, stories, and entire cultures along their winding banks. Following a river meant reliable water and often easier, flatter walking terrain. Some of humanity's earliest great civilizations grew directly along these liquid highways. Now picture something colder, harsher, a world of endless ice and silence. Arctic populations faced conditions that could kill within hours of careless exposure. Surviving there required incredible clothing, shelter knowledge, and eventually sled technology. Dogs bred specifically for pulling allowed families to move faster, carry more. Imagine total darkness for weeks, wind screaming, only a small fire for warmth. Survival there wasn't about bravery alone, it was about accumulated, inherited expertise. Every mistake in that environment carried an immediate, unforgiving, fatal price. And yet, humans thrived there anyway, generation after generation in the cold. Families huddled together for warmth, sharing body heat through the longest nights. Children learned to read ice thickness the way others learned to read faces. A wrong step onto thin ice could end a life in seconds. Yet laughter still existed there too, around fires, inside snow shelters, together. Even in the harshest place on Earth, humans found reasons to endure. Water itself, in deserts, required careful, deliberate management to avoid death. Ancient travelers carried water and treated animal skins, gourds, and eventually clay vessels. They memorized exact locations of hidden wells, springs, and seasonal water pools. That memorized knowledge often meant the literal difference between survival and death. Modern genetics has helped confirm much of what archaeology could only guess. Scientists traced tiny mutations across modern populations to reconstruct ancient migration routes. This evidence has repeatedly confirmed timelines archaeologists had only estimated roughly before. Two completely different sciences converging quietly on the very same ancient story. None of this incredible spread happened because of one brilliant invention. It happened through countless small pieces of hard-won, tested, repeated knowledge. Which plants signal water? Which winds signal storms? Which stars signal direction? Each piece tested by trial, refined by failure, and carefully passed forward. Someone, somewhere, learned something the hard way and made sure others remembered. Picture a grandmother teaching a child which berries would kill instead of nourish. That single lesson, repeated for generations, quietly prevented countless future deaths. Knowledge like this rarely made history books, yet it built entire civilizations. It lived instead in memory, in story, in the careful voice of elders. That quiet chain of memory is arguably humanity's greatest invention of all. No writing, no institutions, no libraries, just memory, courage, and stubborn persistence. So how did ancient humans spread across nearly the entire planet? Not through one heroic journey, but through countless small, desperate, hopeful steps. A slow drift following food, a body built for walking, generation after generation. Land bridges appeared briefly, and hungry humans simply walked through them. Boats were invented independently again and again, wherever the ocean demanded it. Camels crossed deserts, dogs pulled sleds, rivers carried entire early civilizations forward. Every single mile was earned through memory, courage, cooperation, and quiet desperation. Behind every successful migration stood countless nameless failures we will never know. Every person who ever crossed an unknown horizon carried real human fear. Fear of thirst, fear of hunger, fear of never seeing home again. And still they walked forward, paddled forward, pushed into the unknown anyway. That same restless, searching instinct still quietly lives inside every one of us. We call it curiosity now, but it once meant the difference between survival and extinction. Every road, every flight path, every shipping lane traces back to that same impulse. The impulse to see what waits just beyond the next horizon. Maybe that's the real inheritance passed down from those ancient travelers. Not just our DNA, but that same restless, searching, unstoppable human spirit. The next time you cross a bridge or board a plane, remember this. Someone, long before maps existed, made that same journey on nothing but faith. They had no certainty, no guarantee, only hope and a reason worth risking everything. Perhaps that is the truest measure of what it means to be human. Not comfort, not safety, but the willingness to step toward the unknown anyway. Every family tree alive today traces back to someone who dared to leave. Somewhere in your own blood is a person who crossed a frozen bridge. Somewhere in your own blood is a person who paddled into darkness. Their fear was real, their hope was real, and their choice changed everything. The horizon they once feared became the world we now call home.